Well, thank you for joining us for the Curatorial Slam as the conference winds down. In the true spirit of the event, I promise to be brief and very informative. I look forward to the Slam each year because it's a testing ground for new ideas and projects that may shape our discipline in the future. These concise presentations are the beginning of dialogues that are delightfully direct because the format demands it. They deal with undertakings in various stages of completion and provide some answers, but more importantly, will raise questions. Some presenters will share with us their knowledge so we can benefit from how they assess the outcomes and goals of a project. Others will deal with any number of conceptual, logistical, and financial risks, while still others will outline strategies they use to meaningfully relate visual art to the past and present. In short, this year's Curatorial Slam will be fairly expansive. Each presenter will be given a maximum of 6 minutes and 20 slides to tell their stories, but it is what happens after each presentation that is important. I encourage you to reach out to presenters using the AAMC membership directory to keep the conversation going. The directory, as well as recordings of the Slam presentation and many other proceedings of this year's conference, will be uploaded to our website in the next few weeks. In closing, if you feel passionately about a topic as our presenters do, please submit a presentation for next year so we can keep the dialogues going. Thank you.
Hi there. My name's Chad Alligood, and I'm a curator at Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art in Bentonville, Arkansas. In 2013, I hit the road in search of contemporary American art. Along with my co-curator, Don Bacigalupi, I traveled thousands of miles across this country, crisscrossing the map to visit the studios of nearly 1,000 artists. I visited places you've heard of: Omaha, San Antonio, Memphis, and many more you likely haven't: Lindsberg, Ponca, Banner Elk. In advance of our visit, we'd get in touch with local and regional experts, folks who were in the know, many of whom are in this room. We asked them, which artists in your community are under-recognized for what they do? The outpouring of responses was staggering and humbling and formed the basis of research for this project. The exhibition ran from September of 2014 until January of this year. The title of this slam is State-of-the-Art Findings and Futures, and here, in the 4 minutes and 39 seconds we have left together, I have time to share precisely 2 findings and 1 provisional future. Finding 1, art in this country builds communities. Consistently and inevitably, we met with artists who serve as linchpins for their local context. As teachers, professors, parents, advocates, their galvanizing effect on their respective communities was everywhere manifest. Further, their artistic practice often directly indicated this embeddedness. You see it, for instance, in the studios themselves, and you see it in the work. In Vincent Valdez's meticulously executed large-scale paintings, in which he depicts his contemporaries in San Antonio in the guises of historical lynched figures to underline the hidden histories that inform our everyday world. You also see it in Vanessa German's lovingly constructed found object sculptures, each of which she imbues with the power to protect her crime-ridden Pittsburgh community. And you see it in the Water Bar, a project conceived by the husband and wife collaborative Works Progress, based in Minneapolis. We collaborated with Works Progress and the Illinois River Watershed Partnership to produce this installation, which essentially functioned as a water tasting station, where trained bartender experts led visitors through a comparative tasting of 3 local waters. The goal was to spark awareness and intellectual inquiry on something we encounter every day, and to open up space for conversation and discovery. In each of these cases, community and context play central roles. In the history of American art, work that responded too explicitly to its immediate context was labeled with the epithet of regionalism. On this score, I think we, in the art world, can take a page from the playbook of the culinary world, which has recently embraced the local as a locus of power and prestige. Rather than regional, the art in State of the Art was local in its approach, and its capacity to build community. Finding 2, contemporary art is for everyone. In a write-up in the New York Times, Randy Kennedy characterized the exhibition as a kind of heartland response to the Whitney Biennial. The born and raised Georgia boy in me bristled at this characterization, that an exhibition of such ambition and scope could only be conceived in relationship to a New York institution. Then again, maybe he was right. Because if 2014 Whitney Biennial curator Michelle Grabner's exhibition was a curriculum, as she called it on several occasions, then State of the Art was more like recess, a space of exhilaration, decompression, and sensory response, a place where the mind and body are free to roam and discover in tandem. Like a playground, too, the exhibition, which filled nearly 20,000 square feet of exhibition space, was sometimes messy, exhausting, and inevitably packed with children. Over 175,000 people visited this exhibition during the 4 months it was open. The art in State of the Art was for each and every one of them. And finally, a future. We're preparing the exhibition now for a tour. We're still in discussions with potential venues, and here we face a series of questions that speak to the very heart of its curatorial impulse. How will this exhibition read when thrust into a new context? Who are its new audiences, and how do we reach them with the same vigor and energy? Will all the work fit? And what about the crates? These are the questions that currently plague me. And if you have soothing words or expertise to share, I'd be happy to buy you a beer, or maybe you'd prefer some water from this kick-ass artesian well that I recently heard about. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all so very much for having me here today. My name is Ramey Mize, and I am the Lunder Leland Curatorial Fellow at the Colby College Museum of Art in Maine, Waterville, Maine specifically. This spring, I have spearheaded the first teen program in the Colby Museum's history. We call it Young Curators, and it's a kind of hybrid program that is strategically designed to offer local high school students immersion in art historical and object-based learning and museum and curatorial practice. I'd like to share with you all these 2 quotes that evoke and express the philosophy that we are employing in this program. A work of art encountered as a work of art is an experience, not a statement or an answer to a question. Susan Sontag. The interesting task of an exhibition is to move away from the reflexive form of art towards something more unstable and propositional. The imagination is key. How to Generate a Collective Reimagining of the World by Charles Esch. Throughout Young Curators, we have strived to foster dialogue and to prioritize art as a dynamic, imaginative experience rather than a static encounter. There are 9 students in the program from 2 local high schools in the towns of Waterville and Winslow, Maine. I'm the lead coordinator or supervisor, but it's a team effort. The program is also coordinated by 2 studio art instructors from both high schools, Suzanne Goulet and Katrina Billings, as well as a Colby College student mentor, who also happens to be my intern, Veronica Vesnaver, and she's an American Studies and Art History major. At our very first meeting, which took place about 8 weeks ago, I asked them a seemingly simple question: what is a curator? After the obligatory long, awkward silence and a little bit of cajoling, their answers literally teamed forth. We came up with words like storyteller, educator, caretaker, creative thinker, caterer, words like exhibition designer, ambassador, author, and many more all emerged. So we learned that a curator actually does quite a lot. So to describe the way that the program works in a little more detail, we meet once a week every Thursday for 2.5 hours. We begin our session with a conversation with other members of the Colby Museum's staff to learn more about the variety of roles that are required to run a museum. So in this way, there is a professional development component as well. And by now, we have met with every member of the museum staff from preparator to registrar to museum director, and it really ensures that the student participants feel like a true part of our team. We then head into the galleries for what I think is the best part, which is discussing, analyzing, and debating the works on view. So we've decided to address only the 19th century American works of art in our permanent collection in order to really refine our focus. And after 5 weeks, the students have all chosen a work of art in the collection that they will use as inspiration for an original work of art that they'll produce in response. So this process really does recall Kehinde Wiley's approach. As he has said, I'm interested in using the path to break open the present day. And I was really delighted to get to see his exhibition at the Brooklyn Museum yesterday. It seemed quite fitting. So by basing a work of art on an earlier work, the students are essentially breathing new life into something already established. They will be using our collection as a window, a catalyst, charging it with newfound meaning when situated in the lens or in contrast with their contemporary perspective. With the mentorship and guidance of Colby art history majors, the young curators are now conducting in-depth research on the artworks that they've chosen. So in tandem with this research, they're also working on producing their own original works of art. It's sort of an ekphrastus project. And ultimately, we're going to stage an exhibition of their works in the museum. That's happening in 2 weeks' time, so it's really exciting. We're really in the thick of things. And this is where, we're really investigating the curatorial exercise. So they will write object labels, artist statements, a press release. They're going to arrange their works in a thoughtful way. And then they will introduce the exhibition to the visitors for the opening reception, and it will be on view in the museum until July. And we will also be showing images of the works that their works are based off of, so that visitors can see their works and then go see the originals. So like I said, we're still very much in the middle of this process. This photo was taken on the very first day, so we weren't that cuddly at that point, but we are now. But it's our hope that this experience will allow the student participants a real sense of ownership of the Colby Museum and of belonging. It has been really powerful in the sense that we're bringing the wider community of Waterville, Winslow, and that area where Colby College exists, and the college together, because sometimes if you work at a liberal arts institution, bridging that gap can be difficult. And we found this has been really successful. So we're activating the Colby Museum's collection through a combination of research and imagination, and we're intending for this to be a gateway for these students to the world of art, critical thinking, and just looking a little bit more closely at the world around them. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. My name is Ashlee Whittaker. I'm the Curator of Religious Art at the Brigham Young University Museum of Art in Provo, Utah. Recently, I found myself not just curating exhibitions, but curating iPad apps, which I've become quite passionate about, actually. Last fall, our museum opened an exhibition, Loving Devotion, Visions of Vishnu, based on the Newark Museum's collection. It explored Hindu devotional imagery through the lens of bhakti, or charismatic devotion to a deity. As a museum at a church-affiliated university, religiously focused exhibitions aren't new to us. In fact, they're an important part of what we do. But past shows centered on Christianity, Judaism, Islam, but none on South Asian religions like Hinduism. I knew we'd have an interested audience. Yet, I also knew that I faced the very real challenge of bridging the conceptual and visual differences between Hindu bhakti culture and the conservative Christian ethos in my community. Much of my audience eschews images in their worship and really embraces narrative clarity in religious images over symbolic or metaphoric ambiguity. Here we go. I had to overcome the visual otherness some might feel about images of Vishnu and Krishna and counter any potential stereotypes or misconceptions about idolatry and non-Western religions. I wanted, there we go. I wanted the audience to connect with Bhakti. Though different in outward expression, in it, I found profound parallels with Christian and particularly Mormon faith that could resonate with my audience. A shared language of devotion, sacrifice, and a desire for personal connection with the divine. I wanted my viewers to have a religiously effective experience via Hindu devotion and see these icons as another symbolic language of a similar devotion. But how could I get my viewers there? Lastly, I had to convey an authentic voice. We have growing Hindu and Hare Krishna communities in our area, all of whom were close collaborators on this exhibition. I wanted the exhibition to be true to them. So with this in mind, I curated the show such that each work of art successively introduced a key concept about Hindu belief in the nature of God, meaningful devotion, and unity with the divine. And I apologize for loading the wrong PowerPoint, but we'll go back real fast. So you can see that banners and text panels within the gallery articulated these ideas, letting the viewer draw their own parallels according to their approach to belief. The design elements were all inspired by India. So this framework sought to build those strong connections, but Bhakti is diverse and it's vibrant. It engages all the senses. I wanted a more immersive experience, letting the audience hear the mantras, the chanting, see the colors and the lights. But I didn't want to overload the gallery walls, go back through, or detract from the reflective intimacy of the objects. So I decided, we're on the slide now, I decided that we would curate an iPad app that would be available to our visitors for free when they came, that could contextualize Bhakti in ways that gallery walls could not, and with an unmatched immediacy that could allow for that personal experience. Our 6-person team went to work. We arranged the app into 3 parts. The most extensive, the first one, was the Find an Artwork section. Its visual menu reflected the gallery layout. Each work of art had a summary tab that had text and audio labels, and also, old slides, also a share function where images were paired with Hindu text and you could share them immediately via social media or email. The perspective tabs that you see here took the concepts we were exploring in the gallery and offered more perspectives about art, worship, or faith from practitioners and scholars. Visitors could hear a Hindu priest compare Vishnu's many roles to his own experience as a father, or a Hindu explain how Krishna impacts their daily life. They could see devotion and ritual in the moment. Some works of art had a highlight section that pulled out certain elements and details and explained those and offered further content. We also developed a spin function to explore certain sculptures in 360. Some works of art were combined with appropriate music, and there's a sample of the share function right there. And each was linked to a map and glossary specific to that work of art. The Learn More section offered insight and pages about India, Hinduism, Bhakti. And the About the Exhibition section was essentially credits. The total cost of the exhibition, or the project, was $51,000, not including my time, but including all the other time. The important question, did it work? Yes. Visitor feedback across the board expressed that the exhibit enlightened and drew them into Bhakti and the significance of these icons, not idols, icons. Countless viewers remarked how surprised they were that they had a spiritual experience. with these objects. Donors, administrators, different leaders spoke of the important bridges built through this exhibition. And to me, most importantly, it was praised and celebrated by our Hindu and Krishna communities throughout the run of the exhibit. Many mentioned the app as an important part of that enlightenment. Pages of viewer feedback cite things they learned, insights gleaned from a commentator on the app. And professors in multiple classes are using the app, which is available for free download, as curriculum, continuing on. Did it distract from the artwork? After creating 3 apps used over 152,000 times, we found that visitors with iPads spend almost twice as much time in the galleries. More importantly, their feedback shows that they are seeing in new and meaningful and transformative ways. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Can you all hear me now? Fabulous. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Mark Mitchell, Associate Curator of American Paintings and Sculpture and Manager of the Center for American Art at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. I'm pleased to be with you to talk about a gallery interactive that we've developed for our upcoming exhibition, Audubon to Warhol, The Art of American Still Life. I've benefited from attending the AAMC annual meetings over the years, and my hope today is to give back some of the good energy that I've received from these events. 2 speakers have been especially influential on this project. First, there was Thelma Golden, curator and director of the Studio Museum in Harlem, who reminded us that as curators, we don't just have a seat at the table when it comes to planning at our museums, we are the table. I found that very inspiring. And the second was Karen Kramer, curator of Native American art at the Peabody Essex Museum. I can remember feeling a sense of wonder settling over me in the auditorium at the ICA Boston as Karen reeled off the preconceptions that her audiences had about Native American art. They were verbatim the same preconceptions that people have about still life. These were the very things keeping me up at night. And yet here she was already reckoning with them. I wasn't alone anymore. So, what have we been up to at the Philadelphia Museum of Art? Our project is a survey of American still life painting from its professional beginnings around 1800 to the 1960s. American art has undergone more than a few changes since the last show like this one was held in 1981, and it needed a fresh look. To start, however, we needed to understand what and how people see when they look at a still life. It's not like other genres, it's a different form of visual experience. We went about doing this in several, initially rather informal ways. We followed people around and unobtrusively, we like to think, wrote down what they said about still life paintings in the gallery. We observed school tours and tracked the pathways of students' questions. And of course, we interviewed people. It was a revelation. The big lesson was that when people first look at a still life, they lead with an I statement. I grow tulips in my garden, or I played the violin for 13 years. They identify with the subject matter through personal experience, and that becomes their launching point for the study of the painting. This is fundamentally different from history painting, what's the story, or portraiture, who is that? Our response, which we've dubbed You in Flowers, consists of a fairly large, 32-inch on the diagonal, in-gallery touchscreen kiosk that invites visitors to explore in the first person one of the exhibition's highlights, our recently acquired Severin Rosen Flower Still Life with Bird's Nest of 1853, which you see here in this sort of reproduction. Unfortunately, you've lost the lower portion of the interactive, so I'm going to try to fill in for you quickly without going overboard on time. Using the Victorian era's language of flowers, a highly involved, if subjective, form of floral symbolism that peaked during the mid-19th century. As visitors approach from a distance, they'll see the painting alone, beckoning, isolated by a threshold. But as they get closer and past the bracketing walls, They'll see the kiosks on either side of the painting set back and canted to about 45 degrees, a little like this podium, so as not to simulate an object on the wall of the gallery. The introductory text, which you don't see, describes the language of flowers as a vehicle for symbolic illusion and a foil for polite conversation. In the 19th century, articles and whole books were devoted to the subject's intricacies, citing literary, scientific, and biblical sources extensively for meaning. It's a deep rabbit hole, and one that offers historically appropriate enrichment of visual experience. After pressing Start, which was at the bottom of that screen, the visitors presented with a list of traits in circles along the bottom, which are basically at table height here, along the bottom from which to choose, and a schematic bouquet at the top with 3 blanks above in which to place them. When satisfied with their arrangement, the viewer presses Reveal and discovers their or a friend's likeness in flowers, along with brief explanatory texts. Again, at the bottom here, you can probably just see the tops of these white boxes, which is where they appear, encouraging the visitor to explore with brief explanatory text about their choices. The experience concludes with a message encouraging the visitor to explore symbolism in other works in the exhibition. The goal is to keep visitors engaged for less than a minute, conveying the idea that objects can mean more than meets the eye, knowledge that they can apply throughout the exhibition. In the context of the larger exhibition that will employ varying feels for each of the 4 historical eras, as well as conceptually immersive displays to enliven period ways of seeing, the kiosk interactive will, I hope, fit comfortably within the exhibition's visual logic and pacing in order to focus and not distract. You in Flowers owes much to my experiences at AAMC, and I hope that it may connect with some of you as you look ahead to your own projects. Only time will tell how we've done with the interactive, but I'm pleased to have come this far and would like to invite all of you to Philadelphia this fall to have a look for yourselves. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Renata Stein, the curator of the Leo Baeck Institute, which documents the history and material culture of German-speaking Jewry. And oh, here we are. It's the Holy of Holies, our art storage. LBI is located at the Center for Jewish History in Chelsea. No? Oh. Oops. Well, sorry. I don't know how to turn it back. Oh, no? Okay. LBI is located at the Center for Jewish History in Chelsea, which is a partnership between 5 Jewish organizations. And the collections of these 5 institutions comprise the largest repository of Jewish cultural history outside of Israel. 2/3 of the LBI archival and library holdings have already been digitized, and we are now in the process of digitizing our 8,000 items art collection. The goal of this digitization project is to open our holdings to a wider audience of curators, scholars, genealogists, and an interested lay audience, so I hope you all pay note. Our institutional focus is not primarily on the interpretation of art, but on how Jewish cultural expressions in all their forms have interacted with Central European mainstream societies. Obviously, we cannot digitize the entire collection, so we are focusing on a number of main areas of importance. First of all, obviously, we have the cultural icons. It's a little distorted, I'm afraid to say, but this is a portrait of Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy, His inclusion, of course, is in and by itself a little bit problematic because he wasn't actually really Jewish any longer, but that's another story. I can't get into that right now. Another significant area is our 19th century family portraits, such as this elderly couple, Blümle and Zadok Durzbacher, who were Albert Einstein's maternal great-grandparents. Among the tangible expressions of Jewish acculturation were, in the late 19th century, was the building of synagogues. Dozens of new imposing structures were built throughout Germany, such as the Neue Synagoge in Berlin. I don't know if you've ever been to Berlin. Most of the synagogue is still around. And another important part of our collection is dedicated to 20th century artists, such as Lesser Uri and Ludwig Meitner, whose work mirrors the degree to which German-speaking Jews had become part of the cultural mainstream. In many cases, LBI's art holdings are complemented by significant archival and library collections that illuminate the life and work of individual artists and their social context. This isn't actually Voldemort. This is an illustration by a Prague artist by the name of Hugo Steiner Prague, who was a book illustrator and designer. And on the right is his transit visa from Japan to the US. It's a very interesting story, but unfortunately I cannot tell it now. The collection also includes a significant number of works by non-Jewish artists, mostly donated by Jewish collectors, such, for instance, as this portrait of the Bronx children, whose family owned a chain of department stores. The portrait was painted by Adolf Ziegler. Probably most of you knows him better as the notorious chief enforcer of the Nazi aesthetic and curator of the infamous degenerate art exhibit of 1937. LBI has also been on the forefront of helping to formulate criteria for the restitution of Nazi-looted art. This is a painting by Anselm Foyerbach, a German artist from the mid-19th century. The painting was stolen from the collection of the Fein family in Leipzig, and the heirs litigated for its return with the German government for almost 60 years. And then when it was finally returned, they really didn't want it. They just wanted to see justice done, and they donated it to the Leo Baeck Institute. When the digitization project is completed, the LBI art catalog will offer an online gateway to a collection of art from German-speaking lands, which until now has been little known and rarely displayed. The digital collection will enable us to upgrade our gallery presentations, and I had a number of inspirations here from this conference, and to curate online exhibits that showcase our holdings. The portal will allow the public to search the collection online, and eventually we will be able to share our digital images with repositories like Europeana and ArtStore. Thank you very much.
So first, I just want to thank everyone for sticking with us here. So I'm glad you're all still here. So 50 years ago this spring, LACMA opened as a standalone art museum. This poster, designed by Lou Danziger, now the grand old man of California graphics, was done that same year. At the time, Danziger was one of several up-and-coming designers invited to develop catalogs, announcements, and posters. Yet despite this early patronage of graphic design, the museum never made it a focus for the collection. In fact, this poster was acquired in 2010, at which point Lou was quick to remind us it had been part of MoMA's collection for decades. That's not to say there weren't any posters at LACMA. In the 1980s, a collector donated nearly 70 French Belle Epoque posters, and in the early 2000s, the museum received important gifts of interwar German works and posters by Robert Rauschenberg. But this was never systematic, and like at many institutions, graphics fell between the cracks of design and works on paper departments. Over the last several years, we've collected graphic design as part of a plan to build a destination collection of California design that Department Head Wendy Kaplan discussed yesterday. We've moved beyond posters to objects such as this Alvin Lustig trade card, Saul Bass album cover, and packaging by Joe Hong. But around 2 years ago, Wendy and I began collaborating with Britt Salveson, Department Head of Prints and Drawings, to develop an interdepartmental strategy to consciously collect graphic design. Together, we consulted with colleagues and visited institutions in LA and abroad to view storage solutions and discuss acquisition policies. 1 year ago, we organized a study day and invited curators, academics, and designers to discuss how LACMA should approach this new initiative. How would we start a collection basically from scratch and without a significant source of funding? We decided that it would be foolish to try and replicate established collections like those at MoMA, the Victoria and Albert, or the Cooper Hewitt, or to duplicate the important local archives like the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and the Center for Political Graphics. Instead, we sought to find what we called the LA perspective and the art museum perspective. And like any collection, founding gifts played a key role in establishing strengths and directions. We've been very fortunate in that area. From the beginning, we were promised a large donation of international posters from the 1960s through the 1980s, a time period when California loomed large in graphic design. Its strengths in California and Japan, among others, gave us a strong foothold to think about the Pacific Rim, looking west from LA rather than east. As we researched and discussed this acquisition, the word got out that we were interested in this often overlooked material, and the gift begat many other gifts. Going forward in this presentation from the last slide to the end, nearly every object you're going to see entered the collection in the last year. So within months of that first collection, we received a second large donation of posters from this period, nearly 100 works by professors and students from the influential Cranbrook Academy of Art, several of whom went on to teach in California. And the seed collection helped to shape our priorities. After receiving 4 significant later posters by bad boy Japanese designer Tadanori Yoko, we were able to convince our support group to purchase one of his seminal early works, this beautiful 1964 silkscreen poster from an avant-garde Tokyo theater, which epitomizes his irreverent blend of Eastern and Western imagery. Upon learning of our interest in Japanese graphics, the seller then connected us with another important gift, 26 posters from master designer Takanobu Igarashi. Igarashi's strong connection with LA, he taught at UCLA and was instrumental in disseminating California design to his native country, made him an ideal addition to LACMA's collection, demonstrating how the LA perspective is in fact an international dialogue. We've also collected Swiss posters with specific LA connections and have our sights set on other places such as Korea and Latin America that have had profound impacts in our city. With California as a jumping off point, we've built a diverse collection, engaging with both popular marketing imagery, as in illustrator Stan Gali's masterful rendition of the iconic California Gidget Girl on the left, and a very different California girl, April Greiman's double self-portrait poster from 1984, 1986, a radical statement of both self-expression in design and the possibilities of a Northern California development, desktop publishing. This one I purchased off eBay, which could be in itself the subject of a 6-minute slam talk. By embracing both the commercial and the experimental, we've sought to represent the spectrum of graphic artistry while still insisting on a high standard of aesthetic intention. This is not to say that every object relates directly to California. We've sought out acquisitions that complement other strengths of the collection, such as the international arts and crafts movement and American modernism. For example, since the museum holds several pieces of Charles Rennie Mackintosh furniture, we could make a case for the major purchase of this incredibly rare Mackintosh poster. As you may be starting to realize, our graphic design collection has grown exponentially in the last year and a half, with nearly 900 new acquisitions. This is due in part to its ephemeral nature. While it can be inexpensive or even free for a collector to assemble large bodies of contemporary work, they can turn out to be rare survivals mere decades later. Our founding gift, which the donor originally estimated at 250 objects, clocked in at nearly 600, even after a rigorous selection process. Others have grown similarly during inventory. As a result, we're exploring ways to streamline acquisitions and maximize storage. At the same time, we don't want the collection to become a catch-all for ephemera, and so we've explored other ways to preserve important material that comes our way. We've partnered with the Research Library to build a complementary collection of visual culture material that supports the museum collection, but doesn't necessarily tell a graphic design story or doesn't meet condition standards. LACMA doesn't have the resources to process archives, so on one single designer acquisition, we're collaborating with an outside library with process work going to our partner and examples of displayable finished work coming to our museum, a model we hope to refine and replicate. Playing on our strengths as an interdepartmental project, we have a special interest in designers whose practice incorporate drawing and printmaking. In 2013, I organized a small show of works by San Francisco printer Jack Staffaker, who employs the traditional tools of the typographer's trade to explore kinetic composition and pacing in both design and experimental prints. We continue to delve into the design art dialogue in a series of upcoming installations. At only 2 years into this project, we still have many directions to explore. Our rapidly growing collection is still all works on paper, leaving the field of digital and motion graphics wide open. In January, we presented a panel on the subject, including the designer of this psychedelic 7-Up advertisement, to a sold-out crowd, and that was even after a little bit of a publicity fail in which the program didn't go up on the website until 4 days before, demonstrating that there's an eager audience out there. Contemporary collecting remains another question mark, and so with many important graphic design schools in the region, we recognize that there's a lot of potential for broader collaboration. But the rapid progress we've made and the incredible enthusiasm we've seen encourages us to move forward with the challenges ahead. Thank you.